we fear. The danger of fear is that we can run into something and we can look back, so we could be going into an opportunity and look back at before, something that Lot's wife did. Instead of looking forward to see what God was going to be providing for Lot and his wife, she was looking back at what seemed familiar to her. So this might seem like I'm going on a tangent, but I promise it works. So lately I've been reading the book of Joshua, and in chapter 1, just chapter 1 alone, the line "do not be afraid" is repeated 3 times. In the beginning of the book of Joshua, Moses, he was that familiar face. Okay, so we always have something familiar that we like to run to. For Joshua and the people of Israel, Moses was that familiar face. He was the only leader that the people of Israel had for about 40 years. And so now there was a new person, a new leader, which was going to be Joshua. And the people of Israel, they were supposed to be moving forward. They were supposed to be, not thinking about the slavery that they just had and that torment that they had. They were supposed to be moving forward with God. And the constant thing that would reassure the people of Israel are the promises that were made by God to his people. And our God is a moving God. He's always moving, he's always working, and he's always moving forward into the future for us. And we all know that verse, "For I know the plans that I have for you." So back to kind of what I wanted to talk about. So fulfilling the promises of God require that we as his people walk by faith. God gave us authority as well. So we say in the prayer of thanksgiving every day, "For you have given us the authority to trample on serpents and scorpions." These serpents and scorpions can be our fears as well. In the beginning, when God created Adam and Eve, so I've noticed in every talk we always talk about Adam and Eve, and I think for good reason as well. When God created Adam and Eve, there was no fear. So fear came after their fall. And Adam even said, "I heard your voice in the garden and I was afraid." Like Eve, she wasn't afraid of anything. She wasn't afraid of, for example, her body image. She wasn't afraid of what Adam would think of her. Adam wasn't afraid if he wasn't going to be able to provide because he trusted in God. Adam was afraid because he knew that he did something wrong and he disobeyed the commandment of God. From that, fear developed. So us as humanity, we then became afraid of our own selves. Even with Cain and Abel, when Cain murdered his brother, he was expecting the worst from God. And so he created this own fear in his mind. Do you guys know what God did to Cain instead of punishing him? No? That's cool if you don't, because I didn't know this either. Yeah. Yeah, he had a lot of descendants, yeah. But apart from that...
No, but as in there were blessed, there were the descendants that were put aside.
Yeah. Yes, that's exactly right. So instead of punishment, God comforted Cain and he marked him with a mark so that no one would kill him, even after he just murdered his brother. And so Cain was expecting this. He created this fear in his mind that God's going to do something terrible to me, but instead God protected him. And this just shows also the compassion and the love that God has for us, even towards an unrepentant heart as well. So, if we were to talk about the martyrs, for example, the martyrs, they didn't fear lions, they didn't fear fire, they didn't fear torture, they didn't even fear death. And Christ teaches us in Matthew 10:28 that we are not to fear those who kill the body. So we need to learn to be courageous in our hearts, because the church actually prepares us for martyrdom through strength, through the casting out of fear, and that's through love. So fear and faith hold the same basis. They're the belief that something that has not happened is going to happen. Does that make sense? So they're the belief that something that has not happened is going to happen. So fear is the expectation that something bad is going to happen, whereas faith is the expectation that something good is going to happen. And fear and faith, they cannot exist in their fullness at the same time. So one has to cancel out the other, right? And it's up to us whether we allow fear or faith to override in our lives. In Joshua 1:9, we all know that famous verse. It declares that through following God's commandments, which is the first part of the verse, I probably should have brought it up. The first part of the verse says, "Have I not commanded you, do not fear and be of good courage?" He commands us, he gives us this commandment. And it's through this commandment and through choosing to have faith in him and trusting in his promise, we declare that faith will always conquer fear if we choose it. So finally, as part of the degree that I did, so my background is psych, we did a whole semester in a unit for fear. And a lot of scholars we found, and even spiritual fathers I found, when they're talking about fear, they said that it holds you back from reaching your full potential. So what is it that we really fear? Do we fear failure, embarrassment, not being accepted? We're already successful, we're already viewed as treasure by God, and we're already accepted into his family. And he's conquered that one thing that humanity has always feared and has always questioned, which is death. And so from that, we should have no fear. We should have faith in his promises. And if you go through the book of Joshua as well, you'll find maybe through the first 4 chapters, there's 12 references that say do not fear. Trust in his promises and have faith in God that he will provide. So essentially, live your life and don't let fear control you or shake you. Thanks. Yeah.
Thanks, Vic. Appreciate it. First and foremost, I see some new faces, unfortunately for all of you. So we have I thought to do it now, before people get too tired, I guess. We have a little tradition here. We just want to find out your names, get to know you, your favorite ice cream flavor, and your pet peeve, something that annoys you. So I'm going to pass this around. I think I see 1, 2, 3. I know some of us know you, but you're a new face to some people. Again, on Tuesday? So I don't know. Did you do it on Tuesday? Oh, no, I want to get it. I don't know you. I didn't come on Tuesday.
So my name's Marianne. One of my fears... No, that was my friend. No, I said horror movies. And then pet peeve, I said not having a plan, and people laughed at me, but that's another story. And ice cream, I said caramel.
Carlos, my name's Carlos. Favorite ice cream is probably, I don't know, maybe gay time or something. And my pet peeve is when people ask me to do things like this.
My name is Ferry. What was that one? Pet peeve. Wow. What was that? A fair few. I'll start off with ice cream, anything chocolate. Pet peeve, maybe someone disorganized. Yeah.
Tonight we are very, 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 very blessed to have Uncle Wahid with us. For those of you who have been with us for many years, he was with us back from the warehouse days. He'll remember the freezing winters and the boiling summers during the resurrection liturgy, and that was always rough. But we got through it, and Wahid has always been an asset to us. I don't know if you guys read the bio, but I didn't know any of this, unfortunately. Wahid is like an amazing person. Tonight's topic is leadership in the life of a Christian. So if you notice, we're doing like a little mini-series. We had diabolic wars in the life of a Christian, order in the life of a Christian, and now leadership in the life of a Christian. So I think it's very relevant in today's trying times. So Wahid Amzy is the head of Farah's executive coaching practice, He developed the first government-accredited diploma of executive coaching in 2014. He's an experienced business executive with exposure in general management, marketing, sales, and business development in so many countries. Australia, New Zealand, Japan, China, Korea, Taiwan, India, UK, USA, Singapore, Malaysia, and the Middle East. This is a very busy man. He has a master's degree in coaching psychology from Sydney Uni, and he's an engineer with various qualifications in corporate and business management, including a Master of Business Admin and a Diploma of Corporate Marketing, and he's also a doctoral candidate in research focusing on futures studies of strategic leadership effectiveness in engaging the workforce. Okay, so he's a man worth listening to, I promise. Wahid, thank you very much for blessing us tonight. Please take the stage, whatever you want to call it.
Do you want me to stand here? Do you want me to stand here? I loved your talk. That was beautiful. Because this is something I live by. Do not fear. Fear not. How many times the Bible repeated that for us? And how many of us really believe in it? Do not fear. We cannot get it any clearer than this. Do not fear. Right? Thank you. Because this is really maybe the essence of leadership. My favorite ice cream, by the way, is mango, okay? I love the theme that you carry here. I'm blessed to be here among you today. And do not let the bio overwhelm you or set your expectations, please. The most important thing that you find your own leadership in the future. And it doesn't matter what others are. The most important thing is what you will do yourself as a Christian leader in the future. But let me share with you what I have learned myself about leadership, because leadership really is about fellowship. And fellowship is the heart of Christianity, right? Fellowship is the heart of Christianity. From the time our Lord Jesus Christ was here on our earth, and then whatever happened after that till today, is about fellowship. In the church is about fellowship. In the deacons is about fellowship. The Sunday school is about fellowship. All the services is about fellowship. So actually the biggest similarity between leadership and Christianity is is a principle of leadership. And that's maybe the one thing I would like to emphasize today. Now, leadership in the world get classified in academia at different levels. The first level is people leadership, how we lead people. And it's about a leader and a follower. And then it's about the transaction that happened between the two, and whether the leader has a capacity to capture the imagination and influence the followers to actually walk with him or her down a certain journey and achieve something or not. So that's the people leadership. Then a little bit for those of you who are in the corporate life, or in business, you start to get into what we call tactical leadership. And this is more about the task and the people, how I manage between the workload that I need to fulfill versus the people and their needs. And that requires a different level of leadership. Then we move into the operational leadership, which is about systems and processes and companies and businesses. And then, of course, the top layer of this is what we call a strategic leadership. And that's about the top layer in the company being able to lead the company to safety through their business planning and strategies. Today we will talk about the first layer, because that's really why when it matters, people leadership. So I would like to visit the concept of leadership with you and talk a little bit and discover it actually, to understand what is it that makes a good leader according to our Christian beliefs. But I would like to ask you a question first. By show of hand, how many of us believe that leaders are born versus leaders are made? So let's first take leaders are born. How many of us believe leaders are born? If you believe it, raise your hand. Okay, how many of us believe leaders are made? Okay. Now that is a Christian belief. That is a Christian belief. That doesn't mean, by the way, that all the leaders are made. No, there are leaders because it's a trait set. It's a trait and behaviors. So yes, some are born, some are made. And the good news is, if we decided that I want to project leadership qualities, it's something that is not far from us. Because actually it starts with a little example we had today. Do not fear. Do not fear to become a leader. Do not fear to shine as a leader. As a matter of fact, as Christians, we have been told we are the light of the world. What that means? What that means that we are the light in the world? It means leadership. We need to step in leadership. But leadership, maybe in our understanding as Christians, we need to ensure that it reflects the very foundation of leadership for any business, for any individual, for any family, for any individual in their daily life, which is values. So the basic thing, what are the values that drives a leader? Now, I'm sure if you have been outside the church environment, you have seen many leaders. We have seen business leaders. We have seen in the sport side, we see leaders. In the political side, we see leaders. And we see leaders around you all the time. And of course, the behaviors reflect their values. So what are the values that drives me as a leader? That's the heart of it. And that's actually the foundation of any leadership. If the leader can clearly articulate their leadership values are like the guideline that I'm not going to step out of it. If my leadership value is about honesty, I will never lie. If my leadership value is about authenticity, is about truth, is about being helpful to people, is about being actually demonstrate justice in everything I do, if these are my values, and I need to bring this to life as a leader in terms of behavior every day, because this is the only way for me to demonstrate leadership. So what happens if what I do and what I preach are not the same? Can I fake it? Probably for a very short period of time. And after that, people will figure it out. People will figure it out. Now, that man or that woman, they say something, but they do something else. So the values in leadership for us in Christianity is important because we have very strong Christian values that drives in general. And that should be actually the base for our leadership as Christians. Now, that translates in many occasions and in many events around you. And I'll give you one example that actually I've been observing since Abuna joined us here. You go to any of the churches and you notice something, there is a theme that kids need to be kept quiet. They cannot be in the altar. Moms, if their child, cry, they have to take it out of the church. Have you noticed that Abuna here is not that strict with that? Have you noticed how he deals with kids? Have you noticed that? The kids are always welcome in the altar, right? Mothers, if they cry, they cry. Since day one, he demonstrated a style of leadership around how he will lead the church and the new generations that's very distinguished, very distinguished. Many other churches will not allow that. As a matter of fact, before he arrived here, for us, that was not sure that we take this. But the minute he walked in, just by behaving this way, all of us accepted it immediately. Why? Because we saw in it a Christian value, actually. The kids and the children are everything for us. They are the next generation. They are the future of the church. So you see behaviors like this from a leader in a position of leadership in an institution like a church, immediately it imprints in your mind that actually this is a good behavior. I need to model this behavior. But why is it good behavior? Because it's driven by a value system. So the first foundation in leadership for us as Christians is our value system. And if we clarify that in our minds and use it to drive our behaviors and model it in everything we do, I think we'll reflect a beautiful picture of what Christian leaders should look like. Now, once we move away from the values, which is our guide, we move into a space of what we call the self-esteem, self-efficacy, and self-confidence. And leaders are, an important ingredient to leadership is having this basis in their composition. Now, self-esteem is about value yourself as an individual. Unfortunately, sometimes I feel that the cops in general, or our youth, may feel that they don't have the permission to do that. They don't have the permission to value themselves, to shine. But actually, I think that's wrong. I think we need to shine because we have been told that we are the light of the world. So we need to value ourselves. We have the Holy Spirit inside us. So as we actually have what it takes to shine as leaders. And what we need to do is to let it shine. Let it shine. So the first thing is the self-esteem. Have this self-esteem that I value myself, I value who I am, and I value what I carry inside me. The second thing is about self-efficacy. And self-efficacy is to have confidence in my competences, in what I know and what I bring to life. And that, of course, something you build over time as a leader. So you start in a certain stage when maybe you just finish your school and then moving into undergraduate and then postgraduate, and you start transactions with the world, you start to work, you start to become a professional, and you start to build efficacy. Efficacy in your knowledge, in what you bring, in what you're all about, what you can actually contribute to the world. So self-efficacy is important for leadership. But then as you build this, you get into a level of self-confidence. And self-confidence is something different. Self-efficacy is about learning and applying my learning to achieve goals. While self-confidence for leaders is about, actually, I have my knowledge, I know what I know, but in any position I am in, even if I don't know, I will have the confidence that I can survive and I can achieve something and I can go and get the right help, or I can go to learn. Have this confidence, or in other words, don't fear anything. Don't fear anything. Even if you feel, I don't know what to do here. I don't have the knowledge. I never experienced that before. No, have that confidence that if you don't know it, go and learn it. If you don't find the source, find someone who has the knowledge. This is what leaders do. And actually, leaders have a high degree of humility when it comes to their knowledge. You may have heard about a book, if you read business books, called From Good to Great. Have you heard of that book, Good to Great? Good to Great is a book written by an author called Jim Collins. What he has done, he studied all the companies, the big corporations around the globe, to study what makes a company good and what makes a company great. And when he completed his study, he discovered that most of the companies that produce financial results are good. But those companies that are really great, which means they drive innovation, people love to work for them, people have a level of excitement when they are there, employees are fully engaged, management are, they deal with everybody with respect and grow people and develop them. When they looked at this quality of people, they discovered that there is something different about the great company. What was the one thing that differentiated those great companies? They actually put a complete measure for the leadership traits, and the top layer of the leaders had one common trait. What was that? Humility. Humility. And when they asked them, most of them answered simple question like, how you hire people? I hire people smarter than me. So what happened when you struggle? I go and ask my people. They basically stepped down and discovered that they cannot achieve results unless they can rely on others, and they have the humility to do that. Now, I'm sure you'll be able to map this out in our Christianity, where humility resides in our Christianity. So the top trait of leaders is humility, and the top trait as Christians that we need to have is humility. Now, you can see the correlation between leadership and Christianity clearly, coming from facts, coming from searching this. So let's carry on with that. So self-efficacy, self-confidence. What else a leader have to do, to have or to develop as skill set? The next level is the interpersonal relationships. Interpersonal relationships in a leader is very important. Why is that? Because leaders need to influence people. Leaders need to have the power to convince, the power to influence and persuade sometimes, and the power to get people actually to follow them. But that requires us to have very clear communication skills. It's about assertiveness. Now, if you may just review from your memory any episode when we saw Christ on earth communicating or trying to convey a message to people, and how assertive he was in his communication, and how many parables he used to explain what he's trying to say, this is the level of comprehensiveness that the leader needs to have. Now, sometimes, because my job is to help managers to grow, so sometimes as I work with managers, they tell me, oh yeah, but this is common sense. People should get it. Really? Really? People should get it? Why Christ didn't say that? Why Christ didn't say, you should get this, I'm not going to talk about it, I'm not going to explain it. Why he didn't say that? Because actually it's a trait of leaders. Leaders need to take the time to explain, be assertive about what they want to say. And assertiveness and aggressiveness are two different things. I'm talking here about assertiveness, which means to clearly state what you need, what you want, how do you feel, and ensure that you give the opportunity to others also to reflect on what you are saying. This is what I mean by assertiveness. So an important thing for leaders is to have these interpersonal relationships with others when they can actually understand and, more importantly, be understood through their assertiveness in their communication. And leaders do not assume that others have common sense. They take the time to explain. They take the time to give reason. They give the time to give examples. And that's exactly what we learned from Christ in any of the stories we can read in the Bible. The Lord took the time to explain, took the time to bring stories to life, took the time with parables to explain not only the contents but the intent and the output of any example he used. So interpersonal relationship here is important. But it cannot only be pure factual talk. It has to be surrounded by a level of empathy and compassion. A level of empathy and compassion to the people I'm dealing with. As a Christian, empathy and compassion, again, is an important ingredient in our Christianity and in our beliefs and what we have been asked, or how we have been asked to behave. And that's in the heart of leaders. Leaders who lack compassion and empathy usually fail to lead the people. And we found it very difficult to get people actually to listen to what they are trying to achieve and to follow them in what they're trying to achieve. Now, if we get past that stage, now we are into the space when how much power a leader wants to have, or how much power a leader needs to have. Of course, you can tell me, but I don't have the position power. Or in the church, I want to do such and such, but really I'm not in a position to do that. I am not, a deacon, or I am not responsible for a church service. Or at work, I am just, in the front line. Well, the problem with leadership that is maybe misunderstood, that it's not about position power. It's not about status. It's not about the title. Again, from research and from study of successful leaders, there is something we define in leadership called the power bases. And the power bases explain how leaders find a base to build their leadership on it. And again, I'll come back to Abuna's example, and thank you, Abuna, for coming back. Abuna has a position in the church, and it is a position, a spiritual position. And that spiritual position, of course, carry a lot of authority on it. But being a church, and through the history of the church, I haven't seen priests actually exercising this power in, I would say, in any time, at any time. I haven't seen it myself. In a very rare occasions where they were really pushed hard, they used this power. So how they managed to lead? How they managed to lead? It's not the position power that they use, it's not the title, it's not the ability to punish or to execute. No, they don't use this. They don't use this. So how they actually do that? This is where the basis of power in leadership is meaningful. So the position of the leader can be based on a variety of bases of power. One of them is the position, one of them is the title, I agree. But there is another part here, which is maybe the knowledge, maybe what they are expert in, maybe their ability to reward people, maybe their ability, maybe because of the proxy they have, they are very well connected, maybe because actually they have the capacity at a human level to connect with people, the charisma that they bring, their ability to connect at the individual level and get people actually to connect with them successfulully. So there are many bases of power. Those who rely on the position only fail for one reason. The minute they actually lose the position, they lose respect immediately. While those who demonstrate the interpersonal capacity in demonstrating their kindness, their love, their empathy, and in the times we are in now, the compassion, especially in the times we are in now. Why is that? The world has changed. There is no question about that. We used to have, are you familiar with the Maslow pyramid of needs? Have you heard that before? The Maslow pyramid of needs? Okay. What's on the foundation of the pyramid? Security, shelter, food, all right? What's on the top of the pyramid? Actualization and intellect and basically the ability to grow. That's the pyramid. Before COVID-19, all the workforce around the world was on the top of the pyramid. The minute COVID-19 hit the world, the whole pyramid collapsed. Why is that? People now, it's not about my intellect, about my actualization, or about my growth. It's actually about, will I have a job or not? Will I be able to maintain, pay my bills or not? Will I be able to pay my mortgage or not? Now, do you think a leader who doesn't have the capacity to demonstrate compassion and empathy to people will be able to lead them through this difficult time? Probably they will fail. So it's important that we understand at times the position, the title does not lead anywhere. And this compassion and empathy, which is at the heart of our Christianity, is a very important element to help us to lead others. So maybe the last part that I want to talk about today, so what do we need to do to lead in today's world? If we have these problems around us, if we have a kind of uncertainty and ambiguity about the future, businesses are talking about shutting down every day. If you open the news every day, there are hundreds of people losing their jobs. GDP is shrinking, the economy is shrinking, and definitely the big picture is about we are not going to recover from this for the next 2 to 3 years. So what kind of leadership we need today? Do we need business people, to go in there and, no, we have to achieve and push people hard? And I don't think that will work. Why? Because people needs now are different. People needs now about, I just want to be able to survive. Now, to get someone out of survival into a mode when they can adapt into what's happening and start to think creatively of what they need to do after that, this is when a new kind maybe of leadership we need today called positive leadership. And positive leadership is something, again, is in the heart of our Christianity. We have been asked to not fear, which means we need to be positive about things. We cannot panic, that's for sure, but also we do not just go into wishful thinking that things will be okay, because both are two ends of the extreme that probably will take us into, unwanted results. If we panic, we won't be able to figure out what to do. If we go just wishful thinking, basically, better we go to the casino and waste our money, because we are not sure if we are going to win or not, right? So what do we do if we cannot panic and if we cannot go wishful thinking? Basically, this is when we need to build some resilience in us as leaders, as Christians. And every and single one of you here should think of that as a leader, as a leader. As a leader of yourself, that's the first thing we've been asked to do, to lead ourselves. As a leader of our community, of our group, of every one of us need to think that way. So how I build this resilience? What's the components? The basement of positive leadership is resilience. And that's based on three things. Number one, the values. Try to be clear about these values. Bring it to the surface. Remind yourself, what are the values that we need to have? Yes, we need nowadays to have certain values that we stick to it, because it's very easy when the pressures are high and the stakes are high that we can go right and left. And this is the time to stick to our values. Your personal values, your church values, your Christian values. Consolidate all of this, augment it together and make it really, use it to pave the way forward. The second thing is the efficacy. This is maybe the best time to learn, because I was talking to one of the youth in St. Mary's, and he actually really inspired me. He has been working as a mechanical engineer, and with all the manufacturing moving out of Australia in the last 20 years, he found it difficult to find a job. He is mid-30s now, and he decided when things started to go south in March to change completely and start to learn something new. What he's learning now? Data science. Data science and data analytics, machine learning, Python. Wow. It's very inspiring, actually, for someone at the age of 35 to change completely. And this is the second component of positive leadership. Beside your values, your efficacy. Make sure that you have some solid knowledge in a space when you can flourish. And that's what we have been asked to do as Christians, to flourish. So that's important. The third component of resilience is energy. And that's something maybe I don't need to remind you about. Energy as in your health, your physical, your mental, your spiritual. The three goes hand in hand. Your physical energy, your mental energy, and your spiritual energy. This is what builds resilience, and this is what we use actually as leaders to build the resilience. These three values. We work on their values, we work on their efficacy, and we work on their energy through the mental, physical, and spiritual. And that's what you need to bring to your life, these simple components to help you. Now, once you get to that level of resilience, you will find yourself in a much better position after that, because you are not panicking and you are not just going into wishful thinking. You are focused with resilience on the problems that you face every day, and you start to think of practical solutions that can help you and help the people around you to grow. This is what positive leadership is all about. Then you move into next stage, which can be a topic on its own for us to discuss, is what we call in leadership mental toughness. And mental toughness is about raising your mental capacity to a level when you can commit, and you can commit to goals, commit to certain achievement, and stay focused on it to a level that you can achieve it. And then at that point you are fully engaged. You're fully engaged in something that's purposeful, that has a meaning, and after that you find yourself really in a leadership position that others can recognize easily. I still remember again, back to the church example, when we acquired the land here. Now, obviously it was a blessing from God, because we didn't have money to start with. For those of you who were there with us in the warehouse, and I love that warehouse, by the way. It was cold, yes, but it was beautiful. And for those of you who never saw it, it was actually our house. And we turned the store into the church, and we turned the offices next door into Sunday school, and we had few activities happening in that building. So it was great church. But at that point in time, that was after 6 or 7 years of us waiting. Now, if we didn't have the hope, if we didn't have the resilience and the faith that we will have a church, we won't be here today. This land in itself is a miracle, is an absolute miracle, how we acquired this land. But there is something that was happening that actually was leading us in the way. And honestly, and I'm not saying this because Abuna is here, but his positive leadership at the time that we needed most definitely paid off, definitely worked, definitely worked. Because we were at times when, we don't have money. We even didn't think that we have a church like this. We were thinking of a very temporary building. And then we ended with a permanent church. We didn't even think that we'll have all the land, and we ended with all the land. And here we are today, have a new generation that is ready to take this church forward. So what is that? That's positive leadership. We didn't panic. We didn't go just wishful thinking. We stayed focused on the goal. We will have a church. And with a level of resilience that helped us through all the different stages that we went through, we managed to get the church, and we managed to get what we're here today. So I hope that gives you a picture of leadership from the early days, when it was basically more or less about an individual, and today when it's more about a positive individual based on resilience, leading with our Christian values, our strengths and knowledge, with our mental and physical and spiritual strengths, to be able to lead yourself, people, communities around you, and lead yourself into a future that's bright, with one theme: do not fear, do not fear. That's what leadership is all about. Now, I just want to pause here and see if you have any questions, and I'll be more than happy also to stay after that.
Thank you, I have a couple of questions. First one being, what are some ways we can improve our self-esteem and take away doubt from our mind? I'll just expand on that question. Obviously, this idea of having humility is sometimes misunderstood to mean that, we need to put ourselves down, etc. It's misunderstood, I think, commonly in our generation, in the church. I just want to know if you can draw the difference between having being humble and but also having strong self-esteem.
Okay, that's a very good point. As we mentioned early on, valuing ourselves and having self-esteem is an important ingredient in leadership. But how can we protect ourselves from just bragging about ourselves and our abilities? I think that can be done through some simple rituals or exercises. Number one, self-esteem is an inner feeling. It's not something for the outside world. It's inner strength. So it's how we feel inside us. Honestly, it has nothing to do with the world. So I don't need to talk about it to the world. But I need to appear in front of the world that actually I know what I'm doing. So internally, first, I need to rely on the strengths that the Lord gave me here, that I do not need to fear anything, and I'm well supported, and all I need is just to have faith and exercise and practice this faith with the Christian values I have. That's the self-esteem. It's an inner peace. When I have this feeling inside me, it's much easier now to start actually to do what I need to do. But if I don't have this feeling, I will avoid being engaged. I'll avoid getting into an activity because I may have the fear to being rejected or being ridiculed or any of this. So it is an inner feeling, and I don't need to talk about it, but I need to believe it inside myself first. This inner feeling that, no, I'm actually valued. I am the light. I have the Holy Spirit inside me, and I was asked to shine. So all of this is just enough. This is what I need to tell myself and believe it. And believe it, that's more important, to believe it. Because it's true. Each one of us here carry the Holy Spirit, right? What else we need to make us shine? What else? We just need to believe it to shine. But that's really the end of it in terms of we do not need to brag about it. It's an inner feeling, self-esteem. Self-efficacy is a different thing because the world needs to see our self-efficacy. So this is when I will encourage you. Now, if we have knowledge, we need to use it properly and demonstrate it, not to show that or show off, but just to be able to produce something useful with it. So assume, sorry Habibi, what's your specialty? I just forgot. What are you doing for a living? Law. Okay. All right, I have to be careful now. I am sure that as a good Christian, you do not go and brag around. Actually, I didn't know that you are a lawyer, so so that's a good example of what a good lawyer will do. But if I approach you to ask you about a law problem, about a problem I have in the marketplace, I'm sure that, again, the self-efficacy here need to jump out. No, you know, and you need to speak with confidence, and you need to give me this advice, even if I'm older than you, even if I'm more experienced in life than you. No, this is your field of specialization. This is something you know back to front. So you need actually to stand in front of me and shine in that field of knowledge. That's self-efficacy. And you have the right to do this. Actually, you have been asked to do this by Christ. It's the knowledge and the gifts that we have. We need to make it, to polish it all the time, and make it ready to shine. But you will only do this when I approach you and ask you, can you help me with this? Right? Okay.
And I think just on that draws to what you were saying about, you said the continuum between wishful thinking and, what was the other side of it? And fear. And yeah, so I think in self-efficacy, you can't have that wishful thinking, just because I have the position, I'll be, competent. And you can't be the other fear. You can't have the other side of, being fearful. So I think I like how you use that.
And you can deal with the two. We can deal with the two extremes easily. On the wishful thinking side, basically this is about the hope, and hope is part of what we have been asked to believe in. So how I do that? For those of you, anyone here studied psychology, positive psychology? Okay, there is something in positive psychology called the hope theory. And the hope theory is not about wishful thinking. The hope theory is about setting clear goal and pathways and get yourself committed to this. That's what hope is. It's not wishful thinking. It's actually hard work. On the other side, the panicking we talked about. How can I avoid panicking? There is another thing called optimism. How can I learn how to be optimistic about things? It is not about just turn everything bad into good. No, it's about, first of all, what I'm going through now, like COVID-19 as an example. It's very easy for us to be very pessimistic with COVID-19 around. But if we take the learned optimism theory and apply it, let's look at it in a different angle. This is not something permanent. This is something temporary. The minute we will have a vaccine to be the end of it. So actually it's temporary. So what we need to do between now and then, we have to be careful. That's what it is. So actually, if we look at it from this angle, we can be very optimistic about that it will come to an end. Because A, it's temporary. B, I can protect myself if I'm careful. C, once I get there, it will be behind us and things will go back to normal to life. That's optimistic thinking versus, no, this is the end of life. We won't exist after that, right? Do you have any other questions? Please.
What about if we're in the position where we don't have, you spoke about like this ideal leader, what if we're in the position where we don't have that leader? Like, for example, in the workplace, we don't have a leader that's,
Thank you.
that bases his approach on principle-based, etc.
For all the young professionals, this is a very common situation here, and I tell you why. We hire people for the technical knowledge, and when they excel in the technical knowledge, we make them leaders. But we forget one thing, that there is something called leadership skills, and it's not technical knowledge. So very, very common, especially in Australia, that you find in the front line leadership and management position leaders who actually don't have people skills, do not know how to lead, people who are so cautious that they can't make decisions. They get excited, very excitable very easily and can abuse, or they are very reserved and distant from people, or very skeptical in everything they do, or procrastinate when you put them on a challenge, or aggressive in their approach, or micromanage. All of these are very common problems, and I'm sure you see it in your leadership. Now, that is not fun, to be honest. It's not fun, and it's not enjoyable to work for someone like that. But if you put this as an obstacle in the front of you, let's look at it with a different angle. Number one, they are not there forever. And I had people like this on the top of me as my managers. But I've learned that they will not last. Second, the more they continue the way they behave, the shorter the life is. Because people can see through them. They cannot succeed that way. What we can do is to help them. And that's actually a duty we have, is to help them. If a leader cannot find it difficult to make decisions, we try to make it easy when we bring problems to them, to offer them as many solutions and as much data as we can, so they can feel safe to make a decision. If the leader is by nature, get excitable very easily and abuse, we make sure that we basically do not raise the temperature around them and be careful in how we communicate with them bad news, or when we communicate it with solutions ready to go. We just need to think through the process as we deal with leaders like that. And if you do that, guess what will happen? Number one, they will be in a better position, but you will be in a much better position, because others around you will notice, actually, you know what you're doing. Actually, you're better with people. Actually, you can get results. You solve problems. You communicate better. You make better decisions. You can deal with pressure. And all of a sudden, you find yourself, let yourself shine by helping others. Let yourself shine by helping others when they are in trouble. Any other questions? Yes.
Talk that was beautiful. I also had two questions. I think you had about 10 words there that I wanted to write down and sort of focus on it over the next couple of weeks. But in terms, what's the best way of developing this leadership from a Christian point of view, and also in the workplace or in our daily life with family or whatever? Is it a course? I feel like if I try and do this over the next 10 years, I may or may not get there. But what's the best way to achieve these qualities, if that makes sense?
That makes a lot of sense. That's a beautiful question. Thank you. The best way to develop leadership is to start by leading yourself. Self-leadership is a cornerstone of any leadership development. What I mean by that? When we work with leaders, I had a client in Singapore. I remember she was a vice president of a large organization, and I was hired to coach her. And in my first meeting, I said, "How can I help you?" She said, "I want to become a charismatic leader." I said, "Okay." What that means? "I want to tell people what I want, and I want them to do it." So, is that charismatic leadership? What I have in front of me here is someone who doesn't know how to lead herself. We need to lead ourselves first. If we can lead ourselves, we can lead others. How to do that? Managing ourselves better. Manage our thinking better, because cognitions drive emotions, emotions drive behaviors. And what the world sees from us is behaviors. They see us doing things. But this is actually, there is an engine behind it called, or a gearbox behind it called the emotions. And behind the gearbox there is an engine called cognitions. And this is all connected. So if I want to change the behavior, I need to change the emotions, but more importantly, I need to change the cognitions. And this is about how I see things, the perspective I see things. If I see an individual in front of me, and I keep in my mind that that individual is there to hurt me and cause trouble, I will always be in a defensive position with my emotions, and I will always be behaving in a way that's either defensive or aggressive. Now, that's not helpful. That's not good self-leadership. But self-leadership is all about, I look again at that person and I see, how can I help that person? How can really remember the humility being the top tier, in the top tier of the best leaders in the world, according to Jim Collins' model? Humility. And for Christianity, for us, this is the top trait that we want all to acquire. If we acquire this humility in dealing with people in that position, and through our Christian learning and Christian teaching, you'll find yourself in a different world. It is tough, it's not easy, but we know that. As Christians, we know it's tough for us in the way. It is hard. But it will be very, very rewarding when you start to master this skill. Master this skill. How to manage yourself better. How to hold back on defensive mechanisms or defensive behaviors or aggressive behaviors, and instead think, how can I win that individual? How can I get that individual to know that actually I'm useful to them? That actually I can be supportive to them? That actually I can fix problems for them? And think creatively and innovative ways to do that. That is a much better position to be in to build the first block, which is lead yourself first. If you can get to that space, then leading others will be the next stage. And that's about interpersonal relationship. Being able to have a conversation with someone that's really based about that both of us are equal. Even if I'm the boss, both of us are equal, and both of us can contribute and collaborate, and collectively we can actually find the 1 + 1 = 3, not equal 2. That's a skill set about interrelationship. And that's the next level, which is leading others. But I believe it takes maybe longer to build the first part, which is managing myself, and then shorter to lead others, and then much shorter to lead businesses and organizations, and even communities and nations. Yeah.
Awesome, thank you. The second question was, you said something about in our community, you often find, and it's interesting that you mentioned that, but you often find that we don't let our light shine. So why do you think that is, and how do we, because I can see that as well, but, and I think touching on the question before, but we sometimes blur humility, but how can we, going forward, encourage future generations to show that light with purpose?
Okay. I'll give you a simple example about this, and I can say this because the deacons are not here today. And those of you who are deacons, you don't have to worry about this, okay? I see this beautifully when I see, you know when Ashraf and Samah are here? Have you attended a prayer with them? Okay. When Ashraf and Samah are here, and I've been serving with them for the last 20 years, so I know them very well. But I love both of them when they are together, because both of them are shining. Both of them are shining. If you look at them, there is no one who's actually trying to overtake the other or change the tone or go louder or anything like that. Both of them are shining. Versus I go to other places, and when I see one deacon is trying basically to change the tone or raise the voice, that's maybe the difference between we shine together and I shine on my own. That's just one example. And sorry that I had to mention name, but I thought it's something you can relate to easily. This is actually about the shining piece. We can all shine together. But if I try to outperform you, then definitely that is not what we have been asked to do. So how we do this in the outside world? If I go on in my work and just brag about how good I am, I have a grandchild who is 5 years old, And he loved to do that with me. Giddo, I can walk faster than you. Giddo, I can run, better than you. And I keep laughing. I love it, actually. I enjoy it. But obviously, one thing I want him to learn as he grow up, I'll teach him that it's not to be faster. It's not, it's not to be, you can shine, but you don't need to tell me that you're faster than me. Let your work show that. Let your work show that. That's much better. Okay? Any other questions? Okay, I would like to thank you all. I'd like to thank Abuna for having me today. And if you need to have a chat with me directly, please connect with me. You can find